morning, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Come on, how's everyone doing today? Hello, hello. My name's Ian Feiner. I'll be emceeing the Alpha Stage today. We have a lot of great panels. This is our first one of the day. I hope everyone got some rest. I hope everyone flew in all right. Everyone, please take your seats, and we're going to get started right now so we could be on time and have a good run of show. It's nice to meet everybody. Okay, so for this first panel, we're doing What About Digital Identity? As we know, the Web3 space is full of creating your own digital identity, and we have some great speakers today. First, already on stage, we have Sandy Carter, the SVP of Unstoppable Domains. Everyone give a round of applause for Sandy. All right. All right, next I'm going to introduce my man, CEO of Nest, Charles Anderson. What's up, Charles? Come grab a seat right here. Yeah, absolutely. Next, let me bring to the stage the founder of Cassiopeia Services, Steffi. And then our incredible moderator for the day, my man, Crypto Blood. What up, Crypto Blood? Look at those Gucci slides, man.
How you doing, man?
Take it away,
Thank
brother.
you, thank you. How's everyone doing today? Come on, let's get some energy. I know it's early. Have any of you gone to the Crypto Memorial here in Miami? Did you guys go visit it?
Oh.
Huh?
The Miami Heat Stadium?
The Miami Heat FTX Stadium. You know, it's a curse, I think, with stadiums, right? You got the Citi Field. You got, what else? The United Center. And of course, Enron. Everyone knows that one. I hope none of you put your companies on the stadium. Please don't. That's a curse. You'll go down. Thank you guys for coming out today. We're going to be talking about identity, or what about identity. I feel like the title really does its justice because we really forget about identity in the blockchain space. At least when I got into the space early on, we didn't think about identity. It was just about being anonymous, anonymity, not having an identity. So as we, kind of go into this new smart contract, blockchain space, identity, digital identity is very important. So I have great experts here that we're going to talk to today about digital identity. So let's go ahead and start off with Steffi, coming all the way from? London. Yeah. Okay. So tell us about your company and what you do, your PR in the PR space.
So I run a Web3 agency, and I used to do lots of IPOs, fundraising with publicly listed companies. And, you didn't talk a lot about identities. There were a lot about tech and what's happened in 2017 when I got into crypto. Then I switched the focus from our clients to more like a Web3 clients and blockchain-based project. Now, talking about identities, I just want to mention the work that I'm doing with the IOHK, which obviously, if you don't know, is the company that built the Cardano blockchain. And that's, I'm pretty much focused on digital identity there because IOHK has been one of the pioneer in digital identity, in decentralized digital identity, building a self-sovereign identity platform. And we get loads of projects coming to us, especially in the education space, so like universities. And then there is also a lot of financial institutions as well. They start to look at KYC and way to identify and verify users. So I think we see lots of demand from Web3 project, but also Web2 and traditional company that they are understanding the value of digital identity. And then obviously I want to mention as well as fashion. I'm a big fashionista. I just love it. And you see all kind of the big brands. They first dive into NFTs, and now they are understanding the value of identity because you can be anyone you want in Web3, and that's a great freedom, right?
Yeah, it is. And we'll talk about and do a compare and contrast between Web 2 identity and Web 3 and how that transition looks for us. Sandy Carter, Unstoppable. How are you today? And let us know what you do over at Unstoppable Domains.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I feel like I have to be a fashionista to even be up on stage,
Right already. Look at the necklace. It's awesome.
My unicorn necklace. Well, thank you. My name is Sandy Carter, and I am SVP at a company called Unstoppable Domains. I don't know how many of you know Unstoppable? Awesome. So we are a digital identity company. We create a digital identity that travels with you throughout the metaverse, wherever you're going. So in the Web 2 world, you know, that digital identity is linked to an application. So if you think about Google, for instance, you sign in with a username or your digital identity. You do the same for TikTok or for Twitter. But because you're signing in with their username and password, which is that digital identity, all the data then stays with that company. In fact, Facebook and Google have already this year through third quarter sold your data for $100 billion. So what happens in Web 3? Well, in Web 3, you have a digital identity that is yours, and it travels with you throughout all the applications. So you use your personal identity or your business identity to sign into any application that you're looking for. You can also use that identity to do encrypted email or to build a decentralized website. So there is a lot of power in this. And for me, that's the big difference between a Web 2 digital identity and a Web 3 digital identity. It's who owns the data. It's all about ownership. Who owns that data?
Charles Anderson, CEO of Nest. I thought we were talking about Nest, the little climate control thing in our homes. Tell us about Nest, your company, Nest.
Yeah, we focus on individually encrypted privacy and private control or confidential control, and what that usually starts out with is device-side security, and then a layered kind of parent-child SSD ID. Because when we're talking about blockchain, fundamentally they are immutable records, right? But then if you put an identity to that without protection, then you're violating even GDPR compliance, right? You're able to reverse engineer who that person is and a perfect history of everything they've done. So the way we break it down is private, individual, and encrypted control. So it allows for permanent records and individually encrypted provenance, and only the user, him or herself, can ad hoc expose that.
So we talked about, Sandy mentioned Web 2 identities and how we don't have control over those. Going into Web 3, we are going to take more control over that. So I want to ask you guys, how does that look at scale with Web 3 identities? Will there be many, many companies that handle and facilitate and issue these IDs? Or do you think there will be a point where we'll have like an oligopoly, where there are a few big companies that people trust and go to for managing their ID?
If I can add on that, I think that the main thing is to build a standard for digital identity, because we are talking about decentralized digital identity. We are not talking about a way to centralize that. So we need to be a standard then people can work with, and all the other companies can look at. I think that's a very important point, is to build a standard for SSI, and that's what we are doing. That's what IOHK is doing. And talking about something that Sandy mentioned before, privacy by design, right? That's the main things. We are building technologies that are private by design, and that way you can be in something that is outsourced and is a standard that other companies can look at.
Gotcha. Sandy, you want to?
Yeah, I agree with Steph. There's a couple of groups right now that are working on standards that are out there. In fact, two of the top groups are out of London right now, out of Europe, building standards for digital identity. And why is that so important? Well, if you think about it, if you're going to be able to log into different applications with it, you don't want there to be another centralized source. So because you want every application to be able to leverage and use that, you need some sort of standard that you can use and leverage as you move forward. Right now, a lot of the integrations are really important, because then you're able to use that digital identity. And I also think that something else Steph said that was really important is privacy. Since most of the data lives on chain, that means that data could be public or private based on what you choose. But then whoever creates that digital identity for you also needs to think about that privacy data. So let's say you're storing in your digital identity tickets, Did you go to the last Miami Heat game? You might be storing, did you go to the Paris Fashion Show? Or you might be storing your Dow votes. Or you could be storing your land deeds. Some of that data you don't want to be public. You want that to be private. So as you're selecting a digital identity partner, you want to make sure that you're thinking about what data of mine do I have the option to share and what data of mine is automatically private.
Charles, you spoke about, and I want to touch on this self-sovereignty, decentralized ID system you have going on. But before that, monetization on our data.
Yeah.
In Web 2, they're making all the money.
Sure.
Okay. What does it look like for Web 3 and our identities and how we monetize that if possible?
Well, basically, until it is self-sovereign, until the user can control that encryption or just choose when to disclose it, that ad hoc, it's basically a repetition of Web 2, right? So, yeah, until people have that control and selection ability, they're going to be taking it still, right? It's because it's publicly available. And I think when you're talking about the credentials, there are actually two different factors that you need to look at. It's not only which credentials somebody holds, it's how is that credential verified from the issuer, right? So there are actually two different standards that need to go in from where it's generated to how it's held and used. So two different structures.
Tell us about...
Can I add something on to that? So there are, like digital identity from Unstoppable, that data isn't automatically public. There is data that is private. And this is why I think we're going to see a big disruption with marketeers. Because think about how you use data today. So if you're a marketeer today, typically what you would do is you'd go and buy data from like a Facebook, and then you would assume there is a fraud rate, usually 30 to 40% fraud rate. And then you do, let's say you're a retailer, then you're going to send out a coupon for maybe 10% off after you've already purchased the data from Facebook and you've assumed a fraud rate. That's the Web 2 way of using data. In Web 3, that same retailer would not go to Facebook to buy data. They would go to you and you and you. And they would try to entice you to give them that data. So one retailer we're working with right now is we've got about 3 million domains or digital identities out there. And what they're looking to do is to say, if you give me this information, then I will give you a $1,500 coupon. That's pretty powerful to me, like 10% off and you bought the data from somebody else, or $1,500 and I get to decide when I share the data, who I share the data with, how much data I share, and when I decide to share that data. For me, that's a big difference between Web 2 and Web 3.
Yeah. Charles, can you explain a little bit more about your unique parent-child technology? I was very interested in that. I'm sure the audience would like to know.
So basically, if we're talking about issuing a digital identity or a permanent domain or structure, right, then that is a set point which can be reverse engineered or attributed to any action, right? So if we're talking about retaining privacy or having that choice control of who you want to sell your data to, right, you have to have a structure where the personal information and the master kind of SSD ID is individually held by the consumer, the user, him or herself only, right? And they have the private keys for that. And then the parent-child relationship is, if they wanted to generate a decentralized ID for, say, banking, or they wanted with a certain service provider, right? Then underneath that, and ad hoc, they can use a single-use DID for that attribution without exposing the parent. So then that can be, re-upped according to biometrics. That could be just burnt or destroyed if it goes through and then it's no longer valid in the system. But fundamentally, for the user, there's no differentiation, right? It's one ID on the structure, and it's very simple to comprehend. But on the back end, you could have 100 DIDs that are managed in your own library, and they can never be put together directly, even though they're on-chain. They can't be reverse engineered, and you can't be tied specifically, right? So you're mitigating the risk for every DID rather than having one which is exposed to everybody.
Did you want to?
I think it's so clever because we are basically cutting out all the money that this Web2 company used to make, and we are kind of taking control of our data. And based on our verifiable credential, then as we are interacting with other applications, we can issue DIDs, right? We can issue these decentralized digital identity that we control, and we decide that which kind of verifiable credential we want to share. So I think this is awesome. That's really this change of the paradigm where the user is in control, and it is not more about Facebook making money because they've got your data and they monetize the way they want. I mean, actually, they can't monetize the way they want anymore, but, you just give their data, and lots of data, We should be able to make money out of our own stuff. We own it, right?
Yeah. We've been talking about the good side of digital identities, right? I'm a contrarian. I always want to ask, people like you guys, the bad side of this space and having digital identities. I'm sure any of you guys know about Sesame Credit in China. Okay, how does that play out here or in other countries with a digital identity, and how can we mitigate a system like that from being implemented?
Everybody's going for me for the private control. Sure. So, I mean, fundamentally, what you're saying is, what are the dangers, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
what is it going back? Until there is private control and individual encryption of those records, right? Fundamentally, anything on-chain is perfectly tracked and reverse engineered, right? So everything is going through. So I think the dangers at the moment are, until people understand that if they don't own it, somebody else does, then there's this capacity for, I'll create a DID here, Microsoft, Accenture, all these big groups, they have it, but it's basically like another profile. It's like a Web2 profile, but it's putting on chain, and you can't take it back, right? So it's more about awareness and education of when you're spinning these up or when you're participating, they are permanent, and they are permanent records, and that can be used by somebody, right?
Sandy, how do you deal with, you're doing unstoppable domains, managing those. How do you deal with duplicates or people saying that I should own this domain? No, it's mine. Kind of go through how you deal with those types of scenarios.
So for unstoppable domains, today what we have is, we have a set of extensions, .crypto, .nft, .888, if you're feeling lucky. Those are the types of domains that we have, and we protect those domains so that there's only one of those domains, because if you have multiples, then you get into problems, right? So it's just like what happens today with ICANN. There's only one Amazon. I used to work for Amazon Web Services. There's only one Amazon.com, and that's regulated today by a group called ICANN. That's a centralized group. In the Web3 world, we just started a group, much like a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, that governs the use of those domains, or helps to set up an industry regulation. So today we have a set of other domain providers who are in there with us so that we can all protect the industry as a whole. We're recruiting right now wallets and exchanges because it's really important for them to ensure that they know that the digital identity coming in is real. Because could you imagine my digital identity is sandy.nft. If I said transfer $1 million here to sandy.nft, if someone else had it and they transferred the money to another person, I'd be a little bit upset. So this group is almost like an industry group or an industry DAO to help to manage a lot of those different areas as well. It's called the Web3 Domain Alliance. If anybody's interested in joining, reach out to me.
Go ahead, Steph.
Well, I think while you were talking about wallet and exchanges, I was also thinking about NFT marketplaces. That's very important to verify the identity of the artist, because I was talking to JPEG Store, which is the largest NFT marketplace on Cardano the other day, and they were telling me one of the things that we really want to fight is having these artists, they come on the platform, they do an NFT drop, and then they run away with the money, and then they cancel, they profile and stuff like that, and then they come back. So in order to protect NFT marketplace, we need to be able to dox people. We need to be able to verify artists, and that can be done with a new way to look at identities and kind of sharing verifiable credentials in a way that is decentralized rather than centralized.
How does that look, though, a doxed identity?
Right. So, for example, as an artist, you need to provide some data, or you need to show some verifiable credentials that kind of dox you. So, perhaps the other collection that you've done in the past, where you come from. There are some data that you can share with the platform, and that will make sure then the next time you come in, then you are basically going to be a unique. You have been doxed, and you can't come back and redo what you have done in the past in a way that might be dangerous for the platform.
I feel like biometrics would be probably the best level.
Yeah, there's multiple biometrics and decentralized storage of that. I'll get into it later, but just on the point here, when we're talking about basically authenticated provenance, right? When we're talking about the verified credential, that can not only be attributed or hard-coded to an asset, but you can follow it through and hard-code it to an exchange. So fundamentally, if the SSDID or the verified credential modules are correctly implemented, then you have the capacity for a self-sovereign notary system as well, right? So you're talking about the privatization of exchange through legal contracts fundamentally on-chain. So it goes from the assets to the exchange, to the control, and even to the settlement. But it needs to start with that attribution and that verified ownership from the participant.
I would just also add, though, I think part of the big protection is education. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but I like to say we're in the dial-up phase of Web3, NFTs, and the metaverse. And because we're so early on, there are a lot of scammers out there. And there's lots of technology that we're talking about that you can use, but the best protection is for people to understand what they're signing and what they're doing and why they're doing it. In fact, I run business development and our marketing for Unstoppable, but I always like to say that my chief role is chief educator. Because if we can't educate people, and you guys are taking a great first step being here today, if people don't understand what they're doing with a digital identity or with an NFT or with a metaverse, then they can be scammed. And I think education right now is so important in this space, especially for digital identity.
Sandy, why does integrations matter so much in the space, especially at Unstoppable?
So if you think about a digital identity, one of the things you want is you want digital identity to have utility. And there's a lot of hype today, and I think that utility is greater than hype. And so in order to get utility, a digital identity provider needs to have a lot of integrations. That's how you can log into a different application. So for example, today you can take your Unstoppable domain and you can log into the Atlantis metaverse. You could use your Unstoppable domain with a Ready Player Me avatar and have it tagged and named with that name. You could use a game like Skull Crusher out of Asia, one of the top games there, and your leaderboard shows your digital identity. Because your digital identity should travel with you, the more integrations that you have, the more powerful that digital identity because it has utility. And what I've been concerned with coming from the Web 2 world over into Web 3 over the last couple of years is, are we focused enough on that utility versus the hype? And I think for us, for the long term, especially as we're in the bear market, utility is going to win. Utility is greater than hype.
And Sandy, when you are talking about portability of your identity, I think an important point that we should mention is about interoperability as well, because you want to have your verifiable credential be portable but also interoperable. So you're not just talking about the Polygon Ethereum ecosystem, but you want to look at other ecosystem where there is a lot of like building as well. And I think one of the things that IOHK is doing, which is very much forward thinking, is about looking at cross-chain integration. So like the Lace wallet, which is going to be released next year, it will have the opportunity to interact with different kind of chains. So we are taking that approach, thinking at Cardano not just as one ecosystem, but thinking about we need to work together to make sure that any users and any person that log into a metaverse or log into a game can move the identity along as you go into different environments.
If I can just agree with her for a second. So one of the things I think that's really important for greater utility is that, you know, when you create an avatar, like even if you create a Ready Player Me avatar that's tagged with your unstoppable identity, you can only use that in 4,200 metaverses. Now you may think, well, that's a lot. But if you're using Epic and you're creating your avatar with Epic, they don't interoperate. They don't work together. So you can create your skins and your digital assets for a Ready Player Me avatar, but then it doesn't transfer to Epic or to Unity or beyond. And that's why you're seeing all these alliances come up today, like the OMA, the Open Metaverse Alliance. Because we're so early in the space, you're going to see a lot of these standard creation alliances or ways to interoperate that's going to come up. So I would encourage all of you who are in Web3, who want to see this industry push forward, check out some of those alliances, get involved and be active in them, because it really is going to make a difference for widespread adoption and for greater utility.
So Steffi, you're from the UK, right, London, and I heard Charles mention this, GDPR, right?
Yes, indeed.
How does that integrate with Web3 digital identity? Is it oil and water, or can they complement each other?
I think GDPR is it was the first kind of step forward to protect or people take control of their data. But the next level is really KYC. And also be able to kind of, exactly what Sandy said before, be able to share the data that you want in the different kind of environment that you decide to participate in. So GDPR is something maybe coming more from a Web2 institutions that we want to protect you users, but actually we don't want that. We want us to be educated enough to understand, you know, that we need to protect our data. So we want to bring these forward, the GDPR. Right? And that's when we need to get educated and take control of our data and stay up to date with any kind of technology. They are there for us to achieve those goals.
Excellent. Charles?
Yeah, I mean, GDPR was put in and exactly as that, as kind of a protection, but I think even in the documentation, they were saying they did not anticipate for blockchain. This was not designed in mind with this. So it's that fundamental kind of, if you put it up, then it can be reverse engineered and it's kind of immutable, right? So the only solution that we have, and we are GDPR compliant, is individually encrypted entries, right? So publicly garbage, right? It's just random. But personally, you can decrypt it and expose that, right? So from legal contracts to
So they do complement one another.
If you have that private control, right? Because previously it was much more of a monolithic entry, right? Like anything happening or going through, but that user. And when we're talking about interoperability or transmitting these things, I think one of the core surprises since we've been building and going through is, it's a great question to ask, who has the private keys to your DID? Because there are so many issuers and there are so many even whole services that will give you the public key and let you hold on to that, but they keep the private key. So when you're talking about a decentralized ID, it's just lip service. It's just basically another profile that you're kind of hanging on to without those private keys. So if you have that library, then it's automatically interoperable depending on the transaction.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Give these ladies and gentlemen a round of applause. Ian, my MC.
Thank you. Thanks, Crypto Blood. Yes, give a round of applause for Charles, Sandy, and Steffi one more time. Thank you all very much.